It took me a little shy of over 100 rejection emails before I managed to get the software engineering role that I wanted in Europe. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Ahmed Atefi and I've been a software engineer for the past 6 years. I am currently based in Vienna, and in this channel we speak about everything that's software engineering related. Over the past 3 years, I have accepted 3 different software engineering roles around Europe, and I've relocated twice. And in this video, I want to share with you the process that I have developed earlier in my career that has made me successful in getting the software engineering roles that I want. This exact same process helped me land my latest role at the Silicon Valley unicorn. I like to describe this process in 3 main phases: the explore phase, the grind phase, and the search phase. Chances are almost everyone revisits those 3 phases at some point during their programming career, but the majority of people spend most of their time alternating between the grind phase and the search phase. Personally, I still revisit the explore phase quite often, but it's because I really enjoy doing so, and staying on top of everything in this field is what makes you successful in it. In this phase, we're going to talk about 2 main points. Point number 1 is to pick a programming language, and point number 2 is to level up your technical skills in that programming language, either through doing a code course or doing some example projects. Step number 1, picking a programming language. Now, picking a programming language may seem like a very daunting task, just because of the sheer amount of programming languages that are out there. But the good news is, it doesn't really matter which one you pick from, as long as it's one of the modern and popular ones. And a very simple Google search can already give you so much valuable insight on where to start. You might be tempted to think that if you learn more than one programming language at a time, you will probably be at an advantage compared to everyone else who just focused their time on one language. And you're not entirely incorrect, but for that to actually work, you need to be skilled in at least one of those programming languages. You can think of it this way. When applying for a role, having a skill level of 1 or 2 in more than one language is less valuable to an employer than having something like a skill level of 4 in just one language. I would suggest not worrying much about that, because as you get more advanced and you settle into a position, you will get loads of opportunities to branch into other programming languages. And once you have settled in one particular programming language and you have learned its fundamentals, it will be easier for you to pick up another programming languages, because at least in my opinion, the fundamentals or the basic principles are essentially the same across all programming languages. It is sort of trying to learn many recipes at the same time. If you do that, chances are none of your meals are going to be that good. But if you take the time to hone your skills in that just one domain, you will gain some fundamental skills that will definitely carry over with you when you try to learn different recipes. So my advice is to double down on one programming language and really focus all your efforts there. Now that we have that figured out, it's time to address point number 2. Point number 2 is leveling up your technical skills in that particular programming language. You need to start gaining those skill points in that particular language. Now, if you're at the beginner level, you might want to start with some beginner's course that teaches you the fundamentals of the language before moving to more intermediate level work. There is a ton of resources available online on platforms such as YouTube, Medium, Coursera, platforms like that can get you to somewhat a decent level for a very small or quite often actually no fees at all. If you're at an intermediate level, you might want to start creating actual projects. Not only will you enjoy this much more than just going through course content, but it's also a great way to improve your skills, and it pieces everything that you learned together. This ability to be able to create projects from scratch is truly one of the most rewarding experiences one can have in this career. And the better you get at it, the more it will motivate you to keep on going and growing in this particular field. Bonus tip: push all those fun side projects to some form of public repository like GitHub. Once you've done a few side projects, I highly recommend pushing those to some form of public repository like GitHub. The reason I bring this up is because oftentimes you might find yourself in a situation where the interviewer is on the fence about you, and they might actually say, even though you did quite okay in the interview, we're still not 100% sold on you yet. How can you prove to us that you're a potential fit for this role? And usually having those side projects to show for are the extra nudge that is required for the interviewer to rule in your favor. At this phase, you probably have already acquired a good grasp of how to write code, and you probably have a few sample projects, preferably on a GitHub public repository, under your belt. Now is the time to double down on coding interview prep. In this phase, we talk about two main points: the live coding interview prep and the system design interview prep. Point number one, live coding interview prep. Many interviewers will give you a question with a prompt and expect you to be able to tackle that question and explain the methodology and your approach as you go and provide a working code solution in a specific time frame. These questions usually encompass many categories like binary trees, linked lists, dynamic programming, and graph problems, and so on. These are very important because your performance during these interviews is what decides if you get an offer or not. There's no easy way to get good at this. The way to get good at this is through practice, practice, practice. And the more you practice, the better you'll get at it, and you'll be able to express your thoughts in a more organized manner. You can mass solve these problems on platforms such as LeetCode, HackerRank, or my personal favorite, AlgoExpert. I've already made a video about it, you can check it here. Solving a lot of these questions is super important if you're trying to get into one of the FAANG companies. The reason I bring this up is because the FAANG companies rely heavily on these kinds of questions in their interviews. And for you to perform well, you need to be able to tackle these questions quite easily. And not only that, but also explain your reasoning behind why you tackled it that way in a specific time frame. Point number two, system design interview prep. In these kinds of questions, you are asked questions that have to do with how you would design the architecture of a system. These questions tend to be more theoretical in nature and are more in the form of a discussion. These kinds of questions usually have no absolute correct answer, but rather a set of principles that an answer must include. The way to get good at these kinds of questions is to immerse yourself in the theory behind system design and to properly understand how big tech firms design their products in terms of the architecture behind it. Bonus tip: programming language specific questions. I have been in interviews before where the interviewers asked me questions that were rather specific to the programming language that the role requires. So for example, if I was applying for a role that was Python specific, I would get asked a question like, how does garbage collection work in Python? Or how does the global interpreter lock work in Python? Or if I was applying for a position that is specific for JavaScript, I would get asked something like, what does this keyword do in JavaScript, or what is hoisting in JavaScript? So the way to get good at these kind of questions is to read up on interview questions that you might get asked for that specific programming language. Congratulations! At this point in time, you have spent weeks or even months preparing for your software coding interviews, and now is the time to test out your knowledge. I will preface this by assuming that you have already set up both a LinkedIn profile and a CV, and if you haven't, then a Google search for software engineering CV templates will do for now. If this is something that interests you and you want me to talk more about how to set up your CV and your LinkedIn profile, leave a comment below and I will make a video about it. In this phase, we'll talk about two things: picking the right job and dealing with rejection and continuous improvement. Point number one, picking the right job. My personal approach to this is to only pick jobs that fit my technology stack. For example, if I know Python, then it doesn't make sense for me to apply for JavaScript jobs. There's a caveat to this, however. In the FAANG companies, some of their software engineering roles are language agnostic, meaning that they don't really care about the language that you pick as long as you perform well with that language and as long as it falls into the subset of their accepted programming languages. These usually include the popular programming languages like JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Kotlin, and so on. So you get called for the interview and you go through the process. You crush it and you get the job. Congratulations. But what if you don't get the job? Is that the end of the world? Absolutely not. Which brings us to point number two: dealing with rejection and continuous improvement. The first thing that you need to do when you get a rejection is to identify where that rejection is coming from. Is this because of a lack in technical skills and a specific knowledge, or is it because of a reason outside your control? If it is because of a lack of technical skills, then now you know what you need to do. You need to work on that specific area and you need to take that gained knowledge into your next interview. Usually technical recruiters also give you feedback on why you didn't get the job. So these might be good pointers for you to keep in mind when you're re-preparing for your next interview. Now, sometimes you can go through a situation where it's absolutely outside your control. For example, the technical recruiter would come to you and say something like, even though you were a good fit and you would have been a perfect match for our position, we have decided to go on a hiring freeze. As discouraging as that sounds, it's no fault of your own, and you need to understand that and to move on and to start applying for other jobs. In both of those outcomes, the important thing to do here is to take the feedback, work on it if there's something to be worked on, or work on it regardless so that you improve yourself as a technical candidate, and just repeat the process until you get the role that you're looking for. And I guarantee you, if you repeat that process over and over again, you will become the kind of candidate that technical recruiters fight over. Before ending this video, I want to leave you with a bonus tip. My bonus tip is to increase your batting average. It took me a little shy of over 100 rejection emails before I managed to get the software engineering role that I wanted in Europe. You need to get into the habit of throwing your eggs in many baskets and not just relying on one or two applications and just wait for their outcome. Doing this will give you massive amounts of feedback that you can incorporate into your arsenal, and it will also dissipate the impact of the luck that the luck factor plays in all of this. So for example, the chances that you will get a technical recruiter telling you that they issued a hiring freeze is going to be way less if you apply for 100 companies than if you apply to one or two. I personally believe if you go through this process of mass applying to all the companies that might seem interesting to you and receiving the feedback, whether getting an actual offer or getting a rejection, and taking that feedback and incorporating it and taking it with you into your next interview, you will eventually transform into the candidate that technical recruiters fight over and the kind of candidate that is able to pick the software engineering roles they want to take. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.